Welcome to the Empathic Mastery Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Moore, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we talk about what it means to be highly sensitive and empathic, how this impacts all aspects of our lives, and we explore tools, resources, and solutions so we can shift from absorbing all the thoughts, feelings, and energy of the world around us to being beacons for calm, love, and healing. Hey there, everybody. I am so delighted to be here today with my guest, and you guys are in for a really special treat. Erica Derrickson is an adventurer who travels the world to places like India, Thailand, Bali, and Egypt. Her popular video blogs receive millions of views as she authentically shares her adventure with hopes of inspiring others to claim theirs. As a former award-winning photographer, actress, and current influential social media maven, she is a bright source of energy and inspiration in the lives of others. And I will absolutely say Erica is a bright source of energy. She currently lives in Hummingbird Valley in Guatemala, where she is building her own permaculture homestead in the mountains. Erica, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Jennifer, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Well, you helped. So I have you on because in addition to being a social media influencer and this amazing travel maven, and your book, Leaving America, right?
Leaving America with Erica, How to Travel and Set Yourself Free.
Yeah, How to Travel and Set Yourself Free. You are also an empath. And I wanted to bring you on because I really wanted to talk about the impact of being an empath when it comes to traveling. I would even say the impact of being an empath living in America, and especially in these wild times, making the decision to step away from America. And I really look forward to getting into this. But before we dive into that, I always like to start at the very beginning and talk about who you were as a little Erica, what your experience was like. How did you know you were highly sensitive? Did you have the word empath, or were you like most of us and we're told that you were just being too sensitive and overreacting and taking things too personally? Tell me about your childhood.
Wow, great question. I did not have the term empath in my vocabulary. And yes, I was told that I was too sensitive. I was too much, took things too personally. I would say I was a very bright child. I was very, in some ways outgoing, in some ways, no, I would say I was mostly outgoing. I was very excited about things. I loved to make art. I loved nature, but I was definitely, very, very sensitive, very emotional, which was much harder as I got older, became a teenager, and I did not have the understanding or support of the people around me for my sensitivity. I definitely didn't know how to express myself in a way that honored, my sensitivity, while also upholding and appreciating that sometimes it's hard. It's hard to be around a sensitive person who doesn't have a grasp on their abilities. I later on in life, when I did start learning about what it means to be an empath, I learned this phrase that an empath without boundaries is a liability.
Mm-hmm.
With boundaries is a superpower. So yes. I never learned boundaries until much later. And so my abilities were very much a liability. I didn't know, I joke that it's like if I had been sent off to Hogwarts, I would have had a much different experience cultivating my sensitivity, my abilities. But unfortunately, I wasn't. So I had to learn the hard way, the messy way. I very frequently got very overwhelmed. I struggled with depression. I was medicated for depression by, I think, age 15.
Oh my goodness. I was 18 when I think I was almost 18 when I started getting medicated for depression, but 15.
Yeah.
Holy.
I was going through a hard time. I mean, I've been traveling since I was 5 years old with my family. They worked for the US government. So by age 5, I was living in India. By age 12, I was living in Paris. By age 21, I was living in Singapore. And, it was a great way to grow up, but it was also very ungrounding. I would be thrown into these different cultures. And then just as I sort of found my sea legs, kind of got grounded, then I would be transplanted to another place, another culture. So, by the time I was a teenager, I felt very lost. I felt very confused. I felt very overwhelmed. I was coming back to the United States after living in France. And I just remember this sense of like just not fitting in, but in this like incredibly painful way where it just felt like, everyone else had grown up knowing each other. They had their groups of friends, they had their cliques. And then here I was coming in feeling like this, total alien, not knowing who I was, like what my place was, what my purpose was, like just feeling in a lot of ways, just feeling like useless and lost. And so that led me into depression. And it was really,
Understandably.
yeah, yeah. And and my family, the people around me, they didn't know how to hold that. Like they weren't equipped. Like, I'm really grateful that you teach people about what it means to be empathic, and how to hold and handle ourselves, and also how to hold and handle others, because nobody had that education when I was a person forming. So I think that's something I feel really grateful for now that I have learned more about what it means to be an empath, that, going forward, I know how to hold myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also I know how to hold others. I hope one day to have the experience of being a mother and just how that would affect understanding that like all children, all people have certain sensitivities, and there's not one way of learning. There's not one way of doing things. There's not one way of like reading and understanding reality. There's not one way of processing the information from the world around us, and just really holding that with a lot of respect.
Yeah.
I know that's something I really would have appreciated.
Well, and I've been talking about it all over the place lately because I've been listening to a book called Mother Hunger by this woman, Kelly McDaniel. And she's really talking about, it's her whole book is about attachment theories and also about co regulation of our nervous system. And the thing is, a mother's job, from the time that a baby is conceived and is in utero to about the time that a baby is weaned and or is taking their first couple steps, like as a toddler, a mother's job is that she functions as their nervous system
Wow.
and she is co-regulating. Like a baby does not have a nervous system that functions on its own. And so, as mothers, our job, or I mean, I'm not a mother, nor do I play one on TV, but as mothers, the job is, to be the nervous system, both for self and for that baby. And that is, if we think about how dysregulated so many mothers and women's nervous systems have been for thousands of years, it just strikes me that all of this work that you've been doing for the last number of years is really preparing you to give your child the greatest gift you can give them, which is a regulated nervous system.
Wow. Wow, thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you touched on this concept of a regulated nervous system. It's been coming up for me as like, yes, when I look at the times when I had the most problems, even recently, I'm just returning from my travels. I was just in Bali, Indonesia for 2 months. I came back with like a really dysregulated nervous system after all the travel. And
Yes.
so I feel like so much of the work that I have to do now that I'm getting grounded, or even looking back on my travels that I could have done better, is just to regulate my nervous system. Like that's just kind of the foundation of the work I think that we need to do as empaths, as humans. I think whether or not you identify as a highly sensitive person or an empath, like I think we all have nervous systems and we all know what it's like to be exhausted, strung out, overworked. In fact, I was just listening to this book called Rest is Resistance.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
From the NAP ministry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, and talking about how like the system that we live in is literally designed to push us to our limits, like to push us to the point of breaking down, with this idea that we need to sort of prove our value by constantly being productive. And especially for an empath, that's that's horrific, because
It's lethal.
lethal. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, it's almost like a death sentence, to think that we have to constantly be doing and performing and producing in order to have value. I mean, especially as an empath, I mean, that will kill us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Energetically, emotionally, physically. And it's no wonder so many people, are overwhelmed and strung out. And it's just, we're not taught how to regulate our nervous systems. And we're living within a system that is essentially encouraging us to break ourselves
Yeah.
in order to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a lie, because even if you look at the people who are really prospering, the people who really prosper and really like do incredibly well usually know how to delegate. They know what their priorities are. And it's like we have this work ethic that keeps people like stuck and in the hamster wheel, but it's not even the myth of being self-made and like that if you just work hard enough, you're going to get there. It's not even true. And yet it absolutely keeps people disempowered. But I actually want to go back to, because I'm really curious, like, so you kind of were socialized or were raised in the idea of traveling all the time. Like this was almost like, it's kind of like being raised in like sort of like a family, like, a family of actors where you're inevitably going to end up in show business. And so it sounds like you were like, it's almost like travel was kind of like the thing that was presented to you. And I'm curious, like, when did it go from just being the thing that you were doing with your family and just kind of being at the whims of your family to making the decision to be a traveler yourself? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there was some overlap. I would say the first time I went traveling by myself, I was 23 years old and I went to Thailand. Now, this was facilitated by the fact that I was living with my dad in Singapore, which is, this Asian metropolis. And so to get to Thailand, all I had to do was get on a bus and go north. And I was there the next morning, an overnight bus. So I had sort of a springboard of already being internationally located with my father. And that's what gave me the sort of like the stepping stone to step off and start my own adventure. And that was groundbreaking because, when I do travel, when I have traveled with my family, it's a different experience. And I'm traveling on my own, especially as an empath, when I'm with others, I'm linked to them. I'm locked into them and, their desires and their plans. And a lot of times, if I'm with someone, I'm sort of, a lot of times if they know more than me, like say for a parent, I'm relying on them to like, okay, how do we get from point A to point B? Who buys the tickets? Of course, they're buying the tickets. They're navigating us. I'm just sort of like following along. Now, when I go off on my own, now, and I think this is why traveling alone, especially traveling alone as a woman as an empath, is so both terrifying and liberating because
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer hitching my wagon to someone else's lead. It's now up to me to decide, okay, first of all, where do I want to go? What do I want? First of all, what interests me? What is my North Star? What's guiding me? Because I'm no longer being guided by this person that I was sort of attached to. I'm now charting the course for myself. So, that can bring up a lot of feelings of fear, of insecurity, of like, I don't even like for many years, my complaint, this was before traveling, was it was just this sense of like, well, I don't know what I want. Someone else give me my answers. Where should I go to college? What should I do with my life? Like, what's my purpose? And so getting out on the road by myself in Thailand was so empowering because it was like me and myself. And I could choose to be with other people, but I wasn't attached to anyone in the ways that I had been in the past. So I was really getting to, yeah, just have that dialogue with myself and my own heart about what was calling to me, you know? So that was the first trip when I was 23. I went backpacking by myself for about 2 months in Thailand. And I fell in love with this French guy on this trip, and he was traveling in India. So I then followed him to India and spent, gosh, I can't even remember how long it was. It was 2 months in India. Maybe it was like a month in Thailand and then 2 months in India. And then on that trip, I realized, 2 months seems like a long time to be in a place. But being in India for 2 months is like, it's just barely scratching the surface because it's
Yeah.
such magnificent country with so much to offer. And so I knew I had this great, talking about, being an empath and, how like an intuition, I had this intuitive hit that just came, it landed on my shoulders. It was this undeniable knowing that I needed at some point in my life to come back to India and spend 6 months traveling by myself, no boyfriend, no nothing. I needed to come back to India by myself for 6 months. And okay, cool, great. And I went back. I moved from there. I moved back to the United States. I went to New York City. I went to college. Life took me. I moved to Los Angeles. I started my career as an actress. Shortly after, I moved to Boston and I got a job and I started the grind and just kind of doing life. And it wasn't until 8 years later that my sister told me that she was pregnant. And this news, it was great. Your sibling tells you she's pregnant. It was great. But also it was like this big shock because this promise I had made to myself to go to India for 6 months by myself, it just popped right up. And because again, I'm such an empath, I was feeling everything. And I'm feeling my sister because she's pregnant. It felt like I was getting pregnant and my life was flashing before my eyes. And so suddenly this dream, this knowing that I had to go do this thing came right up in my face. And so I decided that, all right, it's now or never. So that from having this sort of like stable, grounded life in Boston, I decided essentially to explode it all, move out of my apartment, give away my stuff, like just kind of dynamite my life as it was and go traveling to India for 6 months. And so that was on my 29th birthday.
Wow. So right at the culmination of essentially your Saturn return.
It was my Saturn return. I went my Saturn return took me to India for 6 months by myself, traveling alone as a woman. Yeah. And it was a groundbreaking, earth-changing trip. There are no words for it,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, after I came back from that trip, I think I was pretty shaken up, like in a lot of ways. Like I wasn't sure what was real, what do I want? I couldn't go back to the life that I was living before. And so I had a series of a few more travels. So the way I would do it is I would work really hard in the summer. By this point, I had become a photographer. I became an award-winning headshot photographer in Boston. So I served actors because I'd been involved in the acting community. I also was serving the business community. Everybody needs a LinkedIn headshot. So I made it my niche to do these like really high quality headshots. And so I would work really hard during the summer, save up my money, and then I would take that money and I would go traveling during the winter. So I did this successfully for many years until, actually until quite recently, until pretty much till COVID hit. And by that time, I had actually arrived at the place that I'm now calling home, which is Guatemala. Which, if you had told me, back when I was starting this adventure, that I would end up living in Guatemala, I wouldn't have believed you. First of all, I wouldn't even know where Guatemala was. Like, so it was a series of different years going different places. As we mentioned, India, Thailand, Indonesia. I went to Egypt. And then after Egypt, I ended up in Guatemala. And then this is apparently where I'm now calling home. And I've never been happier. I have no remorse, no regret about not living in the US. In fact, I mentioned I was just traveling and I stopped back through the US in New Jersey on the way back home. And honestly, it was pretty stressful to be there. And I was pretty excited to get back to Guatemala, especially now as an empath. I really, I feel things so strongly, and going from these different cultures, stepping from one culture into another, there's such a palpable difference. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, I've got you've said so many amazing things, and I want to talk about India, but one of the things that I've heard a lot of people talk about is like when you come after you've been in an environment where it's not as like hyped as America is, that just even the shock of going into the grocery store. And I've had the experience of even like being at festivals and gatherings where I'm living off the grid for a couple weeks and where everything is just really simple. And suddenly it's like there is nothing quite like walking into a superstore with all of the like fluorescent lights and the aisle upon aisle upon aisle upon aisle of like processed food and produce. And it's like, it is shock, like just all of these choices get so overwhelming. And I just imagine that your return, you're coming back from these countries that just are approaching life in such a different way. And America really is like the excess is just spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. In fact, yeah, the grocery store is such a great example of the sort of like the different cultural systems. Like when
Yeah.
I'm in Asia, when I was just in Bali, I would get my produce or my fruits from, there's like a little old lady with the stand with the
Yeah.
vegetables, and you go there and you see what's fresh, right? And some stand like here in Guatemala, there's like the little old lady who always has the mushrooms, and there's like this lady has like the best zucchini, right? And so you get to know the people, the women in the marketplace, and it's a whole sort of cultural experience where you're interacting with humans. And I like to spend a little with different women to kind of spread the abundance around, because I know that I'm supporting them and their families, and there's just this like really sort of human experience. And then when I'm in the United States, it's like, yeah, you go into Whole Foods. I was in Whole Foods with my sister, and I was like, I picked up a pair of slippers and they were $40. Like, oh my Lord. I like put them down. I was like, Joe, like, yeah. And the fluorescent lights and just, it's a different experience. It's neither right. It's not right nor wrong. It's just a very experience.
Very different.
I find that I really connect deeply with this sort of like very intimate human experience of the marketplace in these other countries, much more so than the grocery store, these big corporate conglomerates, and all, like you said, all the processed food that's everything is wrapped in plastic. Every single vegetable you buy like comes wrapped in a plastic bag. It's
right.
Now that I've really seen other places, I can see things differently for what they are, and it's like, whoa, that system is, first of all, not sustainable. Not sustainable, not the kindest way to interact with our resources. Like, I mean, I could go on and on about it.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you're just really acknowledging that, it's different, that not necessarily passing a value judgment, but just acknowledging it is different. So I want to ask you some questions about India. So one of the things that ever since I was a really small person that I've heard from people about India is, oh my God, there is so much suffering. There is so much misery. There is so much poverty. There is so much it's so hard. And essentially, it's a very hard place for empaths to go because of the misery. And I'm curious, and I think that this is, India is kind of like representation, like it sort of has almost like it's, I don't know, like it's kind of got a stereotype of like there are beggars in the streets and it's going to be really hard. But I think this is in many ways true with any kind of traveling of that exposure to misery. But I'm curious, what is like, and as well as the other thing that I think is sort of a rumor or like one of like the myths of traveling. One is that as a woman, it's not safe to travel alone, that you are, that there are predators out there and that you're vulnerable to, being like all kinds of dastardly, nefarious things happening. And then also that idea of like, culture shock and picking up all of the intensity, the suffering from the world around you. I wonder how much of that is like propaganda and how much of it is actually like in your experience traveling, like where does that land? And I know I just threw two kind of concepts out at you, but in some ways it feels like it's the same category.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when it comes to traveling, the first thing to really understand is that there is a lot of fear mongering, especially for women traveling alone. There's this sense of like, it's not safe out there.
Right.
They're coming for you. There are predators everywhere ready to take advantage of you. And
you're going to get kidnapped the next thing you know.
You're going to, especially going to India, you're going to get groped. You're going to, like you're right. And while yes, like that is true. That's also true for anywhere you are in the world. You can be unsafe in the United States.
Just get on the subway, right? And you're going to get.
It's not really a matter of like the threat being outside of the United States. I think that it's warranted to say that there is both safety and danger anywhere you go. So it's not a matter of the world. It's a matter of, I maintain, of how you hold yourself in yourself. So I mentioned before this quote about an empath without boundaries is a liability. An empath
Yes.
with boundaries is a superpower. So
Yes.
I would say that India is a really, really powerful classroom. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it is both full of misery, but it's also full of incredible beauty. It's both the sacred and the profane. And I had to learn a lot of hard lessons in India, especially because I am an empath and because I feel so strongly, you know, that's something that can be used against you. There are many scams that run on misery. Oh, look at this misery, do something for me, give me money, right? And so I was definitely conned because I was feeling so intensely for people, and oh my god, and I want to help and I want to save everyone, and I was definitely taken advantage of for that. So I think, you know, the most important thing I would say as a woman traveling alone, as a woman just being in the world, as a sensitive person being in the world, most important thing I had to learn in India, especially, was really learning to trust what I feel above
Mm-hmm.
see, right? So I had to learn about using my intuition to really read things on the level of like, what is my gut response to this situation versus like kind of what is at the surface level, because the surface level can play with you like, whoa. But if I'm not attuned to what feels aligned and correct inside, I'm going to be taken for a ride, right? So whether traveling or at home in the US, the most important thing for a woman or any being is just to
Anybody.
recognize, when do you feel uncomfortable? Like,
Right.
what is making me feel uncomfortable? This person actually makes me feel uncomfortable. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something not right about this situation. Yes, they're saying all the right things. Yes, everything looks fine on the surface, but there's something about this that doesn't seem right. Okay, do not proceed. Do not get into a cab with that person. Do not accept like a food or drink from that person. Like these sort of like basic things. If something
Mm-hmm.
doesn't right, don't walk down that street. And I think this is something especially for women, like, we want to please everyone. We want to take care of
Exactly.
people. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to, like, no, India taught me to be like, no, no, like back off, like, no, like, no. So
Mm-hmm.
using, like, learning how to like, if I go out into the world and I'm afraid to use my no, I am
Mm-hmm.
more likely to be taken advantage of than if I can go out into the world and be like, no, this situation makes me feel uncomfortable. No, I will not engage with you. No, I will not shop from you. No, I will not give you. No, I will not, right? And not to say that we're going out into the world being these like cold, heartless, bitches.
Mm-mm.
There is always place to help others. There's always a place to extend generosity. There's always a place to be of service. It's just cultivating that discernment of, where is this actually helping versus where am I enabling some scam, enabling some victim story. There's a big difference between empowering someone to step up and to take care of themselves versus playing into their sob story, that which is actually their job. Like,
Right.
you have people who are literally, like, their work is to go out and get people to give money out of sympathy. In fact, they have horrifying stories of people actually mutilating children because it makes people feel more bad for them, so they'll give them money, right? So I think the most important thing is, as an empath, is really cultivating this sense of discernment, right?
Yes.
And that is applicable whether you're in India or in New York City or, in Maine, wherever you are, that's
Wherever you are.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately, this is what I tell people, is like, you are at the center of your experience. If you go out feeling scared and, oh my god, they're going to get me, and someone's waiting around the corner, and like just stepping into the world with this sense of like this victimhood fear, like you're going to be taken advantage of, like, great, you're probably going to step into some situations that are going to fulfill that story that you're telling. When I go out into the world, my beliefs are, I'm meeting good people, help is going to be there when I need it, I can handle this. I just have to take one step at a time. I just have to hold and handle like what's in front of me now. And I get to where I'm going. When I was leaving for Bali for my trip, which at the time of this recording, I've just recently returned from, I remember one woman was commenting, she's like, you're not safe. You're not safe. Like, the American government says don't travel. Like, you're not safe. And she was like so convinced that like I was not safe going out into the world.
Mm.
And then there I was going to Bali, and like everywhere, like I did not meet one malicious person. Everyone I met was like happy to see me. Everyone, that's also something now that we're more in like these post-COVID times, like there was this intense sense of gratitude of like, thank you so much for visiting our country. Like, thank you so much for coming. Like, thank you so much. Like we were starving, right? Like I literally met
Mm,
a man. I met a man who like so many of these countries rely on tourism, places like Bali, which is a beautiful place, right? And so during COVID, the tourism just dried up. And so this man was telling me that to survive, he went down to the beach and ate little fish because he
mm,
was hungry because there was no work, right?
mm.
So going out now, like I would say now is a great time to travel, especially to these beautiful places. People are so grateful. They're so excited. They're so appreciative, right? And so that's what I encountered. I encountered grateful, generous, smiling, kind people who were happy to see me, happy to help me, like eager to give me a good price on some like beautiful dress. Like I had a wonderful time. I had a wonderful time, And so the fear that that woman was warning me against was really only in her own mind, that had been projected from a system that wants to keep people afraid, wants to keep them controlled, keep them down, keep them in one small place, right? But that's not where I mean, for me, I think my path, my spiritual growth happens, at the edge of my comfort zone. It happens out in the world, not in a safe little cubicle space where things are like predictable and safe. Like the journey, the adventure is something that grows me. It grows my ability to discern. It grows my ability to trust myself, to trust what I'm feeling. It grows my ability to empathize, understand, and have compassion for people who are different than myself. It expands my perspective on the world. I mean, the traveling I've done is the greatest gift. I own land. I'm building a home. I have a wonderful community. I would say one of the biggest differences between, I was just in New Jersey, in this little suburban neighborhood, and in a lot of ways, I felt like I was suffocating, right? And then now I come back to Guatemala. I'm in the mountains. I'm surrounded by hummingbirds. I've already seen a hummingbird pass in front of me during this interview. I'm There's such a different sense of life here. And that's because I found through my travels, through my seeking, through following the call of my heart, I found a place that feels really, really good for me. And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that someone can come here and have the same experience. No, like I believe everyone has to go on their own journey, their own adventure to find the treasure of their own heart. And ultimately, that's what my story is an example of. That's what I've done is I've followed that subtle calling, that gentle knowing, that illogical, intuitive nudge out into the world on a path that didn't make sense, and it led me home.
Mm, mm. Ah, Erica, you are just so much of what you're saying. I really want to, you've said this a number of times, and I just really want to pull this out. An empath without boundaries is a liability, an empath with boundaries is a superpower. And that what I'm really hearing you say is that the difference between traveling as a people pleaser and as a boundaryless younger person versus traveling in your sovereignty, traveling in your discernment, traveling with what your no is, what an incredible difference it is. You spoke about noticing that being in Bali for a couple, like coming back from Bali, you realized that your nervous system was really dysregulated.
Yeah.
And I think, in my experience, just because we recognize that we're empaths and we start doing the work doesn't mean that we don't have to keep doing the work. Like we're susceptible still. What will you do differently to maintain, like, why do you think your nervous system dysregulated the way that it did? And what would you do differently? What did you learn from this last trip?
Yeah, great question. So I think the very nature of travel is it's very dysregulating, right? It
Yes.
takes away our routine. It takes away the things that make us feel safe and secure, right? It throws everything in the air like confetti and it, enjoy, like, haha, fun. Like, and at first that can be really exciting, right? All these new things. Oh my gosh, all these different things to experience. Wow, it can be just exciting is the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that my biggest error in my travels was that with so many changes, so many things I wanted to do and experience, and then just changing schedules and is I let my meditation practice slip. So
Ah.
that sort of core grounding practice. So when I got back, I just attended a 3-day silent meditation retreat at my community home space called Karuna here in Guatemala. And that just, wow, just wow, just kind of just put me right back on track. And I really got to see that, when my mind is not well, when I don't have that strong foundation of meditation, I'm much more likely to get dysregulated with the changes that I'm going through. So I would say that, when it comes to travel, travel, it's a metaphor for life, that just maneuvering the changing tides of life, because nothing in life is going to be fixed. Change is the only thing that's certain.
The only true constant is
Yeah,
change.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's what ultimately what we're maneuvering when we travel is we're maneuvering changing landscapes, changing time zones, changing languages, changing cultures, changing food, like everything's changed. You're in a constant sea of change. So like, how do you ground yourself and regulate yourself amidst that? So I now have just the most profound and deep appreciation that meditation needs to be the foundation upon which all other practices are built. Any coaching, any program, any curriculum, any food, any diet is a waste of time and energy and effort if it's not built on a foundation of slowing down and training my mind to get to that calm, centered space, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing I can do. There's no plant medicine, there's no ceremony, there's no nothing that replaces the efficacy and importance of just the most basic meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's one is I would have been a lot more committed to my meditation practice amidst all the things I was excited about, and that's something they mentioned in one 12-step program is like one of the things we have to guard ourselves against is excitement. When I'm excited, I don't make the best choices, right? So guarding myself against that excitement of all the new and wonderful, shiny things around me when I travel, and just making it that priority to slow down and meditate consistently
Yes.
every single day. I would say that is the foundation. Without that, there is no nervous system regulation, or at least not to the degree that it can be achieved with that consistent practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one. Oh, I think also, we talked about the book Rest is Resistance. I really think that rest is really undervalued in our culture.
Yes.
Especially like, traveling and changing and all the things. It can be, again, very exciting of like, oh, I want to go see this thing and I want to do this and I should do this because I'm here and I need to maximize, my time. I need to get the most out of it.
Yes.
This sense of like, I have to go and do everything now right away. And because I'm here, and so I think that's a really faulty approach because it sets us up for that overwhelm,
Mm-hmm.
deregulation,
Mm-hmm.
exhaustion. So again, I think, slowing down, resting more, carving out those times. Like, so when I went to New Jersey, I was with family and I was both tired and being really like taxed by my family and I have this desire to want to show up for them and, do things and participate. And so again, I think this is an example of where like the boundary issue can make you either be like a gift to the people you're around or a liability. So, a boundary in this case could be like, I have a boundary of I carve out 20-30 minutes for myself in the morning. No, I'm not available to do that. I need to meditate. No, I'm not available. I really want to take a hot bath right now. Like, so instead of trying to like people please everyone, like, oh, I need to be there. I should be there for them all the time. Recognizing, hey, I actually really need to do this for myself if I'm going to be balanced. Really also appreciating like, why do we do it? Why do we balance ourselves? It's so that I can actually be like a good person to be
Mm-hmm.
around. So I can actually like not cause harm because when I'm dysregulated, when my mind is a mess, when I'm not grounded, I'm much more likely to lash out, say something I don't mean, or say something that I regret, speak from anger, speak from a place of just like flustered frustration. So, it's like anything that I can do to slow down, to come back to my quiet center and to just spend that time sort of repairing my split ends from traveling, making that a practice and then stepping into the circle with the people I love, then stepping into relationship, then making videos, like, and not like making that the priority. Like I was prioritizing other things, like getting to the thing, doing this, spending time, showing up, doing this, blah, blah, doing the all of the, and it's like my priorities weren't in the right place. And so that's, I think, why I crashed a little bit. But that was also a really great lesson because I'm grateful because it really showed me, hey, this is why I have to make this my practice. because without
Yes.
it, I'm a mess
Yeah.
and I'm much more likely to harm people. And I don't want to do that.
Well, and I'm really I'm thinking in some ways it's like traveling with FOMO. And I think that the way that we're taught to travel is with this FOMO, experience. And I can so relate to the cramming absolutely everything in. It's like, I'm only ever going to be in this part of France once in my entire life. Therefore, I have to go do this and this and this and this and this. And how exhausting it is. And then by the time we're 2 or 3 days in, we're just not experiencing it. Like there's no depth of experience. Like you might be going through the motions, but you're not having the real experience because we're disconnected. A thought that keeps coming to my mind as we're talking is many, many years ago, I was listening to a researcher and a lecturer who spent time with the Aboriginal people in Australia. And he talked about how the Aborigines would sing these songs of becoming and these songs of traveling to the landscape and to all of the life that they're entering into. Like it's part of sort of this, and they have these songs. And they sing to everything as they acknowledge and greet it, as they come into the presence of it and awareness of it. And they have these like ancient ancestral songs they sing. And at one point, like he was with them in a bus or something. And it was like these people were like singing their song. And as the car started or the bus started, they started to speed up their song. And that really struck me deeply because I thought there is a natural rhythm within the human body for moving and being able to assimilate, moving from one location to another. But as we have gone from, first we went from our own locomotion to horses and other animals that could help us move a little bit more effectively and faster. And then we went from that to like horse-drawn carriages, and then to actually like combustion engines and cars and trains and things like that. And now we are at the point where it's like we can get up in a plane. We can literally have our roots ripped out from the earth that we're standing on and get thrown like halfway across the world. And I really wonder, as I was wondering as you're speaking, how much of the dysregulation is also because of the way we can travel now, that we're traveling at such rapid paces that our bodies do not have the opportunity to kind of like adapt and adjust as we move. And so I was actually wondering, as you were saying, like your very first travel experience was you got on a train and you rode from Singapore to Thailand. And I was thinking, you were in a train and it took hours, like overnight, probably 12 hours to get there. And I was sort of thinking, like, how different was that experience than, basically getting thrown into a tin can and hurtling across continents and going from Bali to New Jersey?
Yeah, that's a great question. It reminds me of a trip that I did many years ago when I was in Australia. I did a road trip from the very southernmost point in Australia to the north. It was a 9-day road trip. And we drove through these different landscapes, and it went from being like very wet and cold into the desert where it became very red and dry. And then ultimately, when we got to the north, it was like luscious and sort of almost tropical. And I'll never forget that experience of driving and really noticing these subtle shifts in the landscape, which, if you compare that to how, as you said, how we're traveling today, you get into a tin can, they launch you across the planet, and you end up in a completely different ecosystem, a completely different, temperate climate, just energetically, everything is so different, like instantly. So, I think that especially for an empath, that can be a very jarring experience.
Very, yeah.
Very jarring. If you add that plus the time change. So, I was going to essentially the other side of the world where day is night, night is day in my body. So I recall quite clearly when I first got to Bali, again, at first it's very exciting. And then, day 2, day 3, as sort of it's starting to really sort of like the adrenaline of the experience is starting to wear off. And I'm really starting to feel how my body feels. And I've had to learn, it's almost like being with like a little child where you start noticing like, wow, hey, you seem like the child is starting to get like irritable and cranky. And it's like, actually, the kid is just tired and needs a nap. And so
Yeah.
I've really learned that, especially when arriving in a place after such a big jarring sort of trip, it's so important, again, as I mentioned, to slow down and rest. So, and also just to have also that, so, yes, we're discerning things about the world around us, but also cultivating that discernment of my own inner world and my own inner landscape of like, honey, you seem tired. There was a time when I was like, I was getting triggered. I was like really frustrated by the traffic. Everything was just feeling really loud and overwhelming. It was like, oh my God. And yet, there's still the sense of like, no, I have to go out and I have to do this and I have to see this and I have to go do everything. But it's like, honey, I think you actually need to go back to your room and take a nap. Like, I needed a nap, a bath, and a good meal. Like, that's what I needed, not to go
Yes.
see everything and do everything.
Yes.
So I would say the best thing I can take with me when I travel is an attitude of compassion and gentleness and patience for myself in the experience. Because if I'm going out and holding myself to some high standard of, I have to, again, produce, achieve, do everything, kind of wring the last drop out of the experience, then I'm much more likely to be setting myself up for some sort of like emotional breakdown than
Yes.
if okay, I'm going to do this one thing and now I'm going to go back and rest. And so this was actually something very different. When I was in Bali 3 years ago before COVID, I was I was much less generous with myself, much less patient with myself, and I was pushing myself to the extreme, always trying to, milk the day for every drop that it was worth. And I was ending up, overwhelmed, exhausted, triggered, angry, sad, all of the stuff was coming up. And this time, I had a very different experience because I really let myself slow down a lot more. I fed myself better. A lot last time I was much more scared of finances. And so I wouldn't feed like okay, what's the cheapest thing I can give myself? Like I wouldn't treat
Mm.
myself very well. So this time, I took myself out to a nice meal. I went to the spa, which, in a place like Bali, it's, we're talking about like a $10 expense. So I would go to the spa. I would give myself a nice meal. I would do this thing where I would go out. I was participating a lot in 12-step meetings when I was in Bali. They have a wonderful recovery scene. So I would go to my meeting in the morning. And then instead of trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with this day in the heat of the day? And it was just so oppressively hot. Instead of pushing myself to go do something fantastic in the heat of the day, I would go back to my room and I would take a nap. And that was great. That
Mhm.
greatest gift I could give myself. And then I would go
Mhm.
out, then I would do something and it's not so hot. So I think that's just the importance of really just noticing when I'm becoming dysregulated is the first step, right? Noticing those small signs, not waiting till I'm having like a big emotional breakdown, not waiting till the breakdown to like do something, but recognizing those small steps along the way, just like I would if I had a child, like you recognize, okay, honey, you sound hungry, you sound tired. So instead of just taking like the face value of the behavior, understanding like the underlying need that's not being met and making it a priority to meet my needs rather than to go see all the things and do the things and have the best time ever, right?
Right. Well, and as you're speaking about 12 steps, there's HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired,
Yep.
recognizing what's going on with us. And you just put some pieces together for me because in my experience with traveling, I, in general, would absolutely hit my meltdown wall at about 2 to 3 days in wherever I was going. And I was absolutely engaging in this behavior where I'd get to wherever I was. I would be so excited. I would be like doubling down on all the activity. And then essentially, I'd hit my wall and I would just spin, like I would spin out. And one of the very last times I went traveling, I was really struck by how different the experience was. But what I'm realizing is I was taking such better care of myself and pacing myself better. But I'm also thinking, like, oh yeah, instead of like getting to a new place and expecting ourselves to just like hit the ground running, what if we take a day and a half, 2 days to assimilate, to land, to rest, to be calm, and to let ourselves arrive instead of this idea of that we just, that we just have to like make the most out of everything. Because I know if I don't deal early, then I can't sustain the trip. Like I will have to, when I was younger, I would have to leave. Like I would get someplace and I would hit my wall of meltdown at about the day 3 or 4. And I would literally have to change my plane ticket to get out of there because I would be in such a state of distress and dysregulation. And I'm loving just I'm putting pieces together in terms of just like even just the reality or the logistics of like, no, do it this way. And it's not going to be nearly as impossible.
Yeah, it's much more sustainable. Like, and again, this is an example of how, we're talking about travel, but we're also talking about life. What we do, what we want to do, the experiences we're having are much more sustainable if we're taking care of ourselves.
Yes.
If we're making our self-care the priority and not people pleasing, not maximizing production and efficiency, right? Not pushing ourselves to the extreme, trying to meet some sort of like external standard of what success should look like, when we really, give ourselves that loving, tender care, especially when we're feeling excited, especially when we want to, do all the things, like making it that practice of like coming back, prioritizing rest. I had this experience. I was in Mexico. I got this beautiful hotel room at this museum, actually, this House of the Jaguar. I loved this place so much. And yet, I have a big regret because I did the thing where I had to like go out and run all over town and see all the things and go do this and that. And it's like, and I remember just like breaking down in the garden and just crying and just being, I want to go home. And it's just like, if I could go back, I would, I'm just going to spend a day in my hotel room. Just like, this place is beautiful anyways, just like resting, maybe just wandering around the gardens, not trying to like get out, and maybe I'll go to a restaurant across the street. Just I wish I just had kept my radius really small, just at least a day, and just make the most of where I am, because, it's like wherever you go, there you are. And yet it seems like there's always someplace else to be. And so it's like, okay, you've arrived at this place. Now be fully there, like be fully in your hotel room. Like, okay, you're in a new place, like enjoy it, because I saw myself always trying to get to the next thing, but then when I got to the next thing, I couldn't be there because I wanted to get to the next thing.
The next thing.
Exactly. So it's really this practice of like, be fully where you are. Be with your breath, be with your body, listen to your body. What does your body need? Does your body need rest? Does it need a bath? Does it need food? Does it need hydration? Does it need movement? No, I can't do movement because I have to go do that. Like there's this sense of like the mind putting all of these expectations and these standards and these like, well, I can't take care of myself because I have to go do this. And it's like, really? So also making a question of like practicing, like, what do I really have to do? Why do I really have to do that? According to whose standards do I need to go see the Eiffel Tower today? Like,
right.
Like whose idea is this anyway? So,
yeah. Erica, this conversation has been so rich, and I can't believe how fast this conversation has whipped by. We're almost at the top of the hour already. And just so many jewels of wisdom. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a little YouTube video of this like little girl who's just like, she's probably like 2.5 or 3 years old, and she's losing it. She's just sobbing hysterically. And her brother goes, and her slightly older brother looks at her and goes, have you had a nap today? And she goes, no, I didn't. And he just looks at her and goes, you need a nap. And to me, like, I think that is one of the messages that like, sometimes it's like when all else fails, like, go take a nap, people. Like, and I know for myself, like that is a lot of times, like I will avoid the nap. I've been avoiding naps since I was 3. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to. But like, there's something to be said for taking a nap. So I really appreciate just you pulling that out and just being like, take a nap, peeps, take a nap.
Yeah. And as a practice, we think of like these spiritual practices being like very highly engaged. And that was actually one of the greatest practices I learned in Bali. I was working with a woman doing voice activation and womb activation work. I mean, they're both so connected. And part of the practice was just laying down and putting one hand on my heart and one hand on my womb. And I find that, sometimes there's this expectation of a nap, like, oh, I can't sleep. Okay, you know what? Don't worry about sleeping. Just lay down, let your body relax. One hand on your heart, one hand on your womb, or one hand on your belly, and just breathe with yourself, and just just be in dialogue with yourself. Okay, honey, what's going on? What do you need? How are you? What's up? And then just, we spend so much time doing, especially with traveling. It's this big going out, going and doing and seeing, and this energy that's very projecting outward. The nature of travel, right, is we're projecting ourselves outward to have this new experience. So to incorporate these moments where it's like, hey, I'm just going to close my eyes for a second and just kind of turn inwards and just be like, change the energy to be like a receptive, inward facing energy. I spent the whole day looking outward at all of these things. Okay, now I'm going to spend some time looking inward and just breathing in that space and just allowing myself to receive any messages, any insights, any ideas. Hey, I would really like some hot chicken soup for dinner. Like enough salad. Give me something hearty. Okay, that's a message from my body that when I listen to that, I'm going to feel a lot better. So again, I'd say the ultimate lesson of when we travel, or travel as a metaphor for life, is just taking those moments to incorporate these practices that help bring us back to our center in this busy, fast-paced world where there are a lot of people to please and a lot of things to see and a lot of things to discover and experience. Is taking those moments to come back home to myself. And that's what makes all the difference.
Mm, mm, mm. So, Erica, one of the questions I love to ask at the end of the interview is, if you could go back in time, and I really believe that there's something about the power of these podcasts and just of interviews where we really can kind of fold the fabric of time back and send a message back to that former self. If you could go back to your struggling empath self, your young, maybe you identify as a former hot mess as well,
Yeah.
but like that time of real struggle, what would you tell her? What is the message that she needed? And what would you send to her? Like, let's just imagine we're beaming it back right now.
I would tell her, it's okay to feel how you feel. I understand. You're not bad. You're not broken. You're not wrong. And I would encourage her to go to the forest, to go spend time in nature, to put everything else down and just be with nature, just be with the trees, go to the water, breathe gently, and tune into your own heart. There are all these messages from the outside of what you should do or what you need or what other people want, and just slow down, tune into your own heart and see what she wants, and then make it a priority to fulfill that and let the other stuff be. And just know that it's okay and it's all going to
Mm,
work out and you're safe.
mm, mm, mm. Erica, this has been such a delicious, rich, like marketplace of conversation. It has been so good. Thank you so much for being with me. So, before I let you go, how can people get in touch with you? How can people find you? How can they find your book? What's your
Sure.
social handles?
Yeah, so my website is my name, ericaderrickson.com. If you go there, you can find the links to my book. You can find links to my social media. The headquarters of my content, where I put out fresh content every single day, documenting my journey here in Guatemala, building my house, living as an empath, living as, a woman, living out loud in accordance with the call of her heart. You'd find that content on my Facebook page, Erica Derrickson. You can find the link. It's pretty easy. Facebook.com/with Erica.
Mm-hmm.
That's ERICA. But on my website, you can also find my podcast, my blog. I have T-shirts. I have some gear, some merchandise from books and things I recommend. And yeah, I'm also on Instagram, though not as active. But Facebook, I would say, my Facebook page is the go-to place to get connected with me and get more of my content.
And your Facebook page is absolutely lovely. I really enjoyed when you were in the airport in Bali, and you were and where you were dancing with
Oh,
the
yeah.
oh, that was so sweet. That was just so incredibly sweet. And
I
and
try to do dancing videos, and I try to give people reminders of how to feel good, even in the face of what life throws at us. And,
yeah,
dancing
yeah.
is one of the greatest ways. So when in doubt, have you napped today and have you danced today?
Have you napped today and have you danced today? And people, if you are listening to this, all of these links are going to be in the show notes so that you can find Erica on Facebook, you can find her on her website, you can find her book, etc., etc. Erica, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and just to share your amazing and truly inspiring story.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me here. I love the work that you're doing. I wish I had found your book, when I was a teenager. I think it would have saved me a lot of heartache. I really hope everyone goes out there and reads it. I mean, I think you have so much to offer people who are highly sensitive and empathic. And, I think it's important that we support each other and then know that we're not alone. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing bad. Like, we have so many gifts. We have so many gifts to offer this world. It's just a matter of us, keeping ourselves in a good state of mind, a good peaceful state of mind, because that's when we can really shine brightly as spirit intended us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh. Okay. I have one last question for you, which is if anybody's contemplating traveling,
Ooh.
what would you say? Like,
Well, I'd say go read my book. I wrote a whole
yeah.
book on how I go traveling, the process I go through, everything from energetically, facing my fears, calling it in, how to call in the resources. I have a whole chapter dedicated to, like, okay, here are the basics, here are the websites you need to use. Here are the, here are the apps that you should have on your phone. Like, here's how you maneuver translating languages and money, and, like, okay, here's how you face your fear. Like, when you're heading for the airport and you feel like you're losing your shit and you feel, your world is caving in and you're questioning if you made a good choice or not. Like, it's all there. So I would say, check out my book, Leaving America with Erica, How to Travel and Set Yourself Free. It's available on Amazon. And then, I mean, ultimately, it's like, if you feel the call, you have everything to gain, and it's okay to be scared. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking that step forward in the face of the fear. And then what I can also tell you is, like, every time I went on these trips, I was scared. I was doubting myself. I wasn't sure of what the hell am I doing? All I knew is that I just felt called to go. And when I did heed that call, life showed me treasures and miracles beyond my wildest dreams that changed me as a person, that made my life better in so many ways. So I would say, if you're feeling the call to travel, do it. Whenever I sign my book, I always write the same thing. I write, follow your heart, and there you will find your treasure.
Follow your heart, and there you will find your treasure.
And that's what I found here in Guatemala. I followed a really crazy journey, which you can read about in my book. And I ended up now finally owning land and building my own home and just feeling very aligned in a way that I never felt before in my entire life. So that's my treasure. My treasure was ultimately to go traveling so I could come to my true home.
Yeah. And you could put your roots down.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Erica.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely a pleasure.
It really has. As we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear what you're taking from this show. Please jump over to empathicmasteryshow.com to leave your comments. In the show notes, you'll find a link to grab your copy of my Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. And while you're there, please subscribe and follow this show. And thank you for your help sharing this show with the people who need it. Please help me to spread the word and send this podcast to friends or family members who need support living as highly sensitive empathic people. Then join me again when the next Empathic Mastery Show airs. Okay, one last time. Hop over to empathicmasteryshow.com for your empathic safety guide. And until next show, shine on. We need you and your gifts here on this planet. So please don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards.